Hello everyone, Edain here and welcome back to another video. This time we're not doing a battle, we're actually doing another ranking video that was recommended by a viewer that I actually started making about a while ago, a few months ago, but I never actually completed it, mainly because I just didn't have the motivation to do it. But hearing what they said, I was thinking a bit more to myself, thinking, okay, let's do this. So I'm now ranking every single faction, not from pure difficulty standing, like how easy they are to beat, how easy they are to play with. It is going from easiest to learn to the hardest to learn. Because I imagine a lot of people that see my videos might not even know what the Edain Mod is, might not even know what Battle Middle Earth is. So I want to make something that just includes every single faction. I'm just going to talk about every single one of them in a few sentences and see what everyone thinks about it. Hopefully everyone will learn a bit. So let's start with the easiest faction to play. Is going to be Gondor. Gondor is so simple to play, but they have so many little nuances to them that it actually feels like a fresh faction whenever you play them. It doesn't feel like you're playing vanilla. You're playing a faction that has been gone through constantly, been upgraded because it's one of the first factions that was into the game, and it has come out a masterpiece. Gondor at the moment is definitely one of the funnest factions you can play as, just fresh out the gate. Absolutely no experience in the game. Just go straight to this faction and you'll have a fun time. You've got a large roster. You've got a large roster of units and heroes. You've got really nice looking units. You've got an old ability from formations, which you can upgrade more thanks to some of your powers. And if you're even if you're close to defeat, you can always clutch it with your powers. You've got a Rohan summon, you've got Army of the Dead, you've got Eagles. You've got some of the strongest powers in the game by far. And that is why I think Gondor is the best to learn to begin with. Secondly, we have Erebor. Not just dwarves in general, I'm going specifically onto Erebor, because they are a strong aggressive faction. You can literally just pick them up, and very similarly to Gondor, you can just smash anything you want and you'll probably get away with it because the Dwarves of Erebor hit really hard and they don't require a lot of skill to use, because it is literally just get them, we get a lot of them, throw them in, and you'll have a fun time. They have all their units serve purposes, mostly to weaken enemies' armor so they can get destroyed even faster. You've got a really powerful economy with Dale now, which you didn't have before back in the earlier stages because Dale wasn't that good back then. But now it is a hub of economic might that makes Erebor even more reliable. The dwarves just can go out. They're definitely the easiest to play, and we're going over the other two a little bit later. Next, we have Rohan, who, at the face of it, you might think, oh, well they're a simpler faction to play as. Yes, they are simpler, but they're not easier, because you've got to use peasants, and if you don't know how to use draft or attack command, which are your two different ways as Rohan to get your peasants powerful, you're stuck with very, very weak, very hard to recruit in bulk peasants, unless you're building farms everywhere, in which case you're not getting your best units, cavalry. The cavalry of Rohan is insanely powerful. Other factions may have powerful elites as well, but they don't have the same staying force as Rohan's early game cavalry, which are the cheapest in the game, and possibly the strongest when you consider all the heroes you can have with them. Also, a really good economy, but you do need to be careful with micromanaging the cavalry. Even though, as Rohan, you need less micromanaging because you can just stampede over almost everything, you have to put a bit more effort in than Gondor or Erebor, which is mostly just infantry supremacy. Rohan needs a little bit more, a little more fast hands. And next up we have Angmar. Definitely the easiest of the evil factions because of their versatile gameplay with the Witch King. So you can now choose from 4 different factions in Angmar to be stronger than they already are. And I would typically recommend Karnum. If you don't know why, go look at my analysis on ranking the 4 different versions of the Witch King video. You'll definitely learn a bit more there. But the main thing about Angmar is their economy is amazing. They're tough as nails. you've got to really work out against them. And if you're not careful, their late game can be some of the strongest you'll ever have to face, especially with their powers. They have a pretty busted combination of destroying an entire army with just 2 powers and a hero. Next up, we have the Iron Hills Dwarves. Another dwarf faction that is very similar to Erebor, but isn't quite as cut and thrust. This faction, you need to put a bit more strategy behind it. They've got unique elites in the form of the Ram Riders. They are definitely the toughest dwarves that can fight nearly anything to a standstill. Until you consider you can get even stronger defenses, you can weaken your enemies to an outrageous degree. And if you stack it all together, if you know how to stack it all together and throw everything in at the right moments, you can make some beautiful plays. But it's not as simple as with Erebor. With the Iron Hills, you do need to have a bit of experience and a bit more time into the faction to play them, but not as much as all the other factions next in the line. Iron Hills, I'd say, is where we start going from easy territory to intermediate territory. And with that, we've got Arnor, which at first you might think, but they're just a sub-faction of Gondor. Surely they're just as good as Gondor. Well, I'm not going to lie, Arnor hasn't had a lot of love recently. Not to say that they've not had anything good going for them. It's just that they don't have that. They haven't been given as much attention as, say, mainstay Gondor. When you look at their Palantir guards, which are still the exact same as they were, just with a reskin, they're not as well thought of as a Fountain Guard. A lot of their heroes and units have not changed since the beginning. But taking all of that aside, they're just not as strong as Gondor because their hero roster of Gondor is just better overall. You've got Denethor, Faramir, Boromir, Aragorn. Those 4 heroes alone just make Gondor so much better than Arnor. But you do need to keep into account that Arnor, on those maps where you do play as Arnor, the mix with things like the elves, their elites can make a late game a bit better. But again, you've got 2 elf heroes as well that don't really work with your faction as a whole, I'm going to say. Just because they work better with the faction they actually are a part of. And next up, another evil faction, we have Mordor, and it even got Sauron to get the One Ring. Don't ask me how I got Sauron, I don't even understand it myself. But yes, Mordor is definitely a faction that you might think, again, it's just another cut and dry faction. You spam, spam, spam. Well, yes, on the surface, all you need to really do is spam. However, if you want the best, you need to make this boy level 10. If you don't get him to at least level 3 in like the first 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to start falling behind because without the influence of Sauron, you've got weaker economy, you've got weaker units, no upgrades for your troops, you're not going to get any extra value from the Morgul blades of your Nazgul, which you are going to need, because just getting any of them gives Sauron a level. There's so many things that make Sauron the key feature of Mordor, and it's why Mordor is possibly, if not for Gondor, Mordor is the poster faction for this mod. Mordor is definitely the poster evil faction for the mod, just because of everything that Sauron gives. If you focus on Sauron's quest system, you'll be surprised. You need a lot of things to get a good late game, but if you put the effort in, you'll be smooth sailing, and you'll have so much fun with it. Mordor is definitely the faction you can have the most fun with, if it weren't for factions like Gondor that just have it so much easier with little effort needed. And next we have the Misty Mountains, the newest faction added to the mod. Probably still the quote-unquote strongest, but I'm going to say that they are not easy to learn because of the fact that if you've played only BFME 1 and you only know if you played Edain before Misty Mountains came out, you'll know only the fortress system. The Misty Mountains don't really follow by that rule. They are much more a free build expansionist faction, but even then, it doesn't feel like you're free building because you can only make these towers, these Gundabad towers, and the Goblin Town towers, which I haven't actually made. But the Goblin Town towers can expand out from themselves in a 180 arc from their back. and then you use that as your main form of economy, while you use military from Misty Mountains, Moria, Goblin Town, and Gundabad, all of the mix. But yeah, but once you start getting these little formulas down, you start understanding how this all works, you can really have a lot of fun. And not just that, you're probably going to have the largest array of monsters to choose from than any other faction, which just means a lot of factions are going to struggle against you, because monsters have always been a thing in Battle for Middle-earth in general that are difficult to deal with. And but you know, pikes exist, so that does stop them. But yeah, Misty Mountains definitely deserving of a silver medal, but definitely is not an easy faction to play as your first one. You should definitely have some more experience under your belt before you go there. And now I'm saying we're going to go into you need some experience in RTSs in general to get these last 4 factions down to a T. And firstly, we have the Lothlórien Dwarves. Now, these dwarves aren't really that much different than their kin. Their main things, though, is that they require a lot of micromanagement to turn them from the weakest of the dwarves to the strongest of the dwarves. And if you want more understanding on that, I have made a video last week just going over the entirety of the dwarves. It is a bit long, but if you've got the patience for it, you can definitely learn a lot from that video, what I try to explain about all the dwarves in general. And I have to say that Lothlórien Dwarves are definitely the faction you need to put a lot of effort in to make the most of it. You get the company of 13, so you have a lot of different dwarves to manage. Obviously, you don't get all of them at once. You have, I think, 4 or 5 you can keep permanently, and then the rest you get just from summons and such. But the rest of their faction is a lot about maneuvering around, fast movements, getting everything done right, getting your opponent to really struggle against you, being able to run in at key points, managing to run away when you need to retreat to save resources. You've got to really put a lot more into this. They are strong, but they require practice. They require a lot of practice to get this faction down right. And if you know about the flanking damage mechanic in this game, and you know how to exploit it, and I mean by exploit, just use it, these dwarves will take you to the top. No doubt. Next up is the faction I hate the most, and I've not actually touched in 4.7 at all. We have Isengard, the faction that I think needs a full rework at some point in the future, because they're slow to build up. They've always been slow to build up, but in the early stages of the Edain Mod, that was like, okay, you've still got like these Orc Scouts you can spam, but now they are your heroic unit, so you can only have 4 of them. So you need to have a whole bunch of other units while you're planning to build up, and once you've built up, you can then start getting these other troops that honestly are about the same strength as every other faction's starting units. So you just spent 1,000 to get to this point. Now you need to get all your upgrades, and that is the late stage of the campaign, so of the battles even. So you're only really strong in the late game, and you've got to really take that to heart, because if you try and do something that another faction can do, you're not going to be able to do it. I don't actually think a lot of people actually give Isengard a lot of praise recently, because they are just sadly one of those factions that needs something to get them back on their feet. They need, I don't know what it is. Their late game is really good. They have potentially the strongest late game if you put in all the effort. You get all the upgrades, the more to level 5, thanks to the Uruk-hai captains you can get. You use your siege, you use your powers and your heroes. But even your heroes aren't the best. They just, I don't know. I don't know what this faction needs, but I really hope the Edain team takes all the messages, all the messages I've been leaving in my videos saying Isengard needs something, because my god, they need something to be put back at a relative pace. I would put this faction probably before Arnor if they got a rework that put them in a good position. But at the moment, they are definitely a faction you need to put a lot of time into before you can even say they are going to be good. You've got to put a lot of effort into this faction. At the penultimate stage, we have Lothlórien. They are a faction that I love. They're personally my favourite faction at the moment, next to the Dwarves actually. But we'll go into that in another time. They've got very unique mechanics in the fact their base is just this giant tree that has build plots that expand from it, as if it was like one breathing network. And then all the buildings you build, you can then make other buildings from other troops from your main building, and your other buildings outside your main building give you your upgrades and such, which you then feed back into everything else. It's very, I can't think of the word, symbiotic, I guess. But yeah, they are definitely not a faction for the faint of heart, and you need to know everything about them before you think you can go back in. You can go into the elves. They're not at all what they used to be back in vanilla days. These elves require a lot of work, but mainly because of their unique mechanics, being the stealth mechanic, which means if they are hiding in trees or have that little blur around them, kind of what like Aragorn over here has. If they have that blur, you can activate an ability that gives them 30 seconds of either more damage or knockback, depending on which wood they come from. Lothlórien get damage, Mirkwood get knockback. And then you've got to consider that these elves get more movement if they're in smaller troops. There's so many little nuances to this faction that no other faction actually has, that you've got to put a lot of things into. And also you get late game permanent map vision, which is amazing, I'm going to say. It is beautiful what the elves are capable of. But you need to know. You need to get everything right and ready, and then go into it saying, okay, I've got this, I can do this, I'm going to win. Because if you can, just go full archer spam with Galadhrim, silver thorn arrows, longbows, there's not many forces that can say they can actually beat that. They're going to need to put some destruction effects so they can just force you into melee, because that's where the elves are actually their weakest, is in melee. But at least not those elves. These elves, however, probably the hardest faction to learn, to play, and has even more some unique mechanics even more diverse than that of Lothlórien, is the elves of Imladris, which they've got a lot of good things going for them. I'm not going to lie. When this faction came out, they were stupidly strong. However, they are still stupidly strong. However, you've got to put so much into learning all of what this faction is, because I've actually played against people, well, I've played against someone who's never touched Edain before, played Imladris, and they just spammed Blade Masters and Spearmen. They didn't know what else to do. They didn't know that if they didn't build a library, they couldn't do anything. They didn't know. So that was a very interesting game. But anyway, they've also got a small roster in general. So if you just go archers against them, you're actually going to have a lot of a much easier time against them, because of if you didn't know, smaller units are a lot easier to destroy with archers than they are melee. When you consider that you can have like 5 things shooting at one instead of one thing hitting one, but that's another thing for another time. Your only access to cheaper units are through your powers and through your outposts, which are you're not always going to get them. You might not always want to get the Journey to Valinor power or the Dunedain outpost. You're not always going to be able to get them. And then you also need to know about the research through the library. And if you're not ready for that, you are going to, again, you're just going to have these elves and nothing else. You're really going to struggle if you don't know about this faction. So if you ever think of touching Imladris, either watch someone who has played Imladris and has all their little nuances down to a T. I'm not just saying just me. There are some more Edain YouTubers out there. I'm not sure where they are, but they're somewhere. Probably mostly in Germany. I'm not going to lie. But yes, give Imladris the time of day once you understand how they are played, because you're going to have so much fun with the elves. You're going to have fun with all of these factions. All these factions are amazing. They've all been done really well. Isengard just needs a bit more attention to them to bring them up to the style that the rest of the factions are at the moment. But other than that, I'm just blown away by how much the Edain team has made with this mod. And just looking at all of them together, it just reminds you of how far they've come since the beginning. It used to be just 4 factions. Anyway, enough of me reminiscing of good old days. I hope you've all enjoyed. I hope you've all learnt something from this video. And if not, you just let me know. I'll try better next time. Hope you've all enjoyed. And I'll see you all next time. Farewell.